Are you an author looking for a cover designer? Do you want to know the pitfalls but also how to look for the designer of your dreams? Stay tuned for a very special interview. I'm Estelle van der Velde, indie author of The Londoners. I post new videos every Tuesday on writing and self-publishing, so subscribe if you want to support this channel. Today is Asya Blue, the super talented creative mind behind the cover of The Londoners. Hi, Asia.
Hello.
I'm super happy that you're here with us today. Could you introduce yourself for the people watching?
Sure. Hi, I'm Asya Blue. I live in New York City. I'm a graphic designer. A lot of the work that I do is for book covers and actually book interiors as well. I do a lot of books, but I do other graphic design work also. I run my own design studio, and I've been doing it actually for almost 30 years. I also teach graphic design, so this is what I've been doing my entire professional career.
Oh, that's awesome. How did you get into the publishing world and into book cover design?
Actually, my very first job out of college was designing book covers, which is not something I planned. When I went to art school, I went to Parsons School of Design, and we studied all kinds of graphic design, and I really didn't know what I wanted to specialize in or if I wanted to specialize. And I was looking for that first job, you know, when you look for the first job. And it happened to be for Penguin Books in their cover department. So it wasn't anything that was on my radar. Somebody just kind of recommended me. They knew a person. So it was my first job. And I was so lucky to be able to actually pretty much start designing from the very beginning. Usually when you start out, you do a lot. I did do a lot of assistant design type of work. And then eventually my art director would give me more and more projects. And I loved books because I'm also a reader. And I always was. So it was just so great. And I loved the variety because it's like designing little posters all the time. So that was my first job.
Okay. And how long did you stay at Penguin?
Only like 2 years. Like a little bit over 2 years. So not that much considering I've been working for almost 30 years.
That's actually awesome. Do you have like famous author names you worked on the book cover?
No, because as a junior designer, I always laughed because I would get books that had very limited print run. And of course, back then when I started, there was no such thing. Amazon didn't exist. Self-publishing didn't exist for the most part. You know, everybody had to go through a big publishing house. So I got to work on books that had like 1,000 or 2,000 print run, which is nothing when you talk about Penguin and Stephen King, who like will print, you know, 500,000. So I always joke that I would get the, you know, the unknowns. But on the plus side, working with authors like that, you have a little bit more creative freedom.
Yeah, you have flexibility, I guess.
Exactly. So everything I worked on, I had a few authors that I guess are now looking back, I was like, oh, that was somebody. At that point, I might not have known them, or they were also just starting out. Jamaica Kincaid is one of them. I actually just heard an interview with her this past year, and she's since then, I did a book for her called Lucy. And then since then, she's become like a famous author. And Carol Shields is somebody else. Back then, I didn't really know who she was, or maybe she wasn't really that known. But now she's known. So just a couple, you know. And
so I guess that you went into indie publishing when you started with Reedsy, right?
Yeah. So, you know, the publishing world just changed since then.
Yeah.
With Amazon, with people being able to just, you know, Ingram Spark, all these other venues where you can print things on your own, where you don't even need to print sometimes, just do ebooks, you know, much easier. Yeah, with Reedsy, I really started to connect with authors like yourself and other authors who, actually, I've met authors who've worked with publishing houses and have decided to do their next book on their own as well.
And what's your opinion on working with platforms like Reedsy? Do you feel that's easy for freelancers like you, or authors, authors like me? Obviously, that's really easy because you have the whole marketplace. Yeah. But how does it work as a book designer? How does it work?
For that type of model, you know, there's other websites kind of like that on a more general level for freelancers, where I don't think they're as positive as Reedsy. Like, you know, what are some of them called? But you know, where somebody posts a project and like all these people just bid on them, and you'll get people bidding, you know, like $10 for something, and of course, like you'll get outbid, and it's just more work than it is. I feel like out of those, Reedsy is in its own kind of, you know, position where they're a little bit more high level than that. First of all, I had to be pre-approved by them. I couldn't just like create an account and okay, I'm a book cover designer. I actually had to show them proof that I've done books before. And when I originally joined them, I haven't done much at all in terms of more current book cover work. I've done book cover work a long time ago. So I didn't have anything on Amazon at that point. So I said to them, I have book covers. I have like JPEGs of them I can upload. So it actually wasn't that easy. For them to approve me, because I had to prove that that I'm established, that I'm for real, that I'm a real designer. I've worked on books. So they do pre-approve you from a professional point of view. And then it seems to me, because I'm never on it from your end, but it always seems to me, I don't know if they encourage it or if there's a maximum number of people that you can reach out to. Like you're not reaching out to 20 people, right? What's the maximum of 5?
You can choose five freelancers and then ask for quotes and
which I think is I think that's very fair for both parties. First of all, it's putting you in a position where you're really focused on picking the right people who you feel you might connect with. And for freelancers like me or designers, I feel like I'm not competing against 100 people, right? And I don't always get the book covers, or the jobs. That's fine. But at least I feel like it's a very fair playing field. So I think the way they set it up is very professional and very fair. And of course, they take a percentage, which is also very fair because they're doing a lot of the work. They're funneling a lot of work my way. And, it makes things easy in terms of payment. I don't have to bill anyone and then go after my clients sometimes like, oh, it's been 30 days, I haven't gotten paid, because it's all set up in the, as part of our agreement. So it's, makes things easier that way. So I actually, in that freelance model where you bid for projects, I think they do it right.
That's good to know. So let's dive into a more specific topic, which is the Londoners, which you designed the cover for. And what was your creation process for the cover?
Well, we first I read your brief, and then I always like talking to the author first. And some authors have a lot of specifics and some just don't. So, but I like to get at least something, from the author. You happen to have, I think, a lot of kind of creative guidance.
Because and I had ideas as well, which I can share.
So that's super helpful to me because it at least because there are so many options, right? I mean, I can go into so many different directions. So the narrower my sort of field of vision gets in terms of the options, the better, because then you get what you want, then we don't spend as much time back and forth. So we spoke, you sent me all your design inspirations. I got right away kind of the feel you were going for, I feel like I was like, okay, I totally get it. And I think part of it is that you were able to articulate it. Part of it is that we kind of understood each other. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't always work out. There's not always that understanding between two people who both may be very competent, right? But it's just a matter of that connection. So I think both of those, I was like, all right, I totally get it. At least I think I do at that point, And I always like to give you options. So I think I gave you 3 options, maybe, I don't remember if it was 3. So and within those options, I try and give you some variations, like different fonts, different maybe color schemes, just slightly different approaches. So it's not like just one design and 3 versions of it, but really 3 directions. And I think from the beginning, you were pretty much like, nope, it's this one.
Yes.
Sometimes authors will be like, I like the color here, but I like the font here. And I kind of prepare for that in advance when I design, knowing ahead of time that even if I have to mix and match, it'll still work. But in your case, you were like, nope, it's this one. So, and I was glad to hear that because that's the one that I liked as well. Right. And that was based on your sketch with the vertical. Yeah.
I was really glad that you used it. Used it.
And you know what else too? Because I'm always up for anything that does something a little different with type, where it's not just like left to right at the top.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, she wants to break up the word. I love that. Do something different where you have to kind of, work a little bit to read it. So yeah, that was.
I really loved it. Actually, when I received the three options, I had my mom coming, and I was like, "Okay, mom, I have three options. I already made up my mind. I really, but what do you think?" And so I showed her the three options, and she was like, right away, she was like, "This one."
That's good. That's good, because usually what I hear from authors, they'll start showing it to different people and everyone will have a different opinion. And then they're as confused as ever. So they're like, I like this one. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. In my case, everyone was like, this one.
That's funny. That's great. Yeah, so it was actually a very smooth one, because the design, like once it was established, then it was more like almost production work, because then it was just getting all the final art in place, and then I got the back cover info from you and just like setting it up. But it was pretty clear what the design was going to be.
And so when you're working with an author, what does they have to do before looking for a designer?
I think they really need to look at other book covers. That's helpful, because sometimes it's really surprising to me. Sometimes I'll work with authors who I shouldn't say that. I was going to say, I actually worked with somebody and I looked up the title of their book, and there was another book cover, a book that was by the same title. And it was surprising to me that they didn't check first before saying this is going to be writing the book or deciding on their title. Like, why wouldn't you Google it? Why wouldn't you go to Amazon? So I think doing that homework, I mean, this was more about the book title itself, which obviously is very important to the design because I'm designing with words. So really looking at other covers and just kind of, I think, thinking about why they like certain things and why they don't like certain things. I think also knowing what you don't like for me is always very important, because it might seem very obvious to you that a cover shouldn't have something, but it may not be obvious to me. Or it might be obvious to you that it shouldn't be a red cover, but I might think, oh, red is perfect for it. So sometimes like just thinking about for the author what they don't like is also needed, not just what they do like. But when I see authors, like when they upload examples of other covers, that's like super helpful for me. So, but that was more like giving me sort of a direction. But then as far as choosing a designer, what they need to do is really look to see who's out there and look at that person's work, because we all have very different design sensibilities in the kind of work we do. Even though all my covers are different, there's probably some sort of not similarity, but common thread, or just the way I approach them. So we all have different styles, and I might not, also in terms of genre, like I probably don't have anything like science fiction related, so I'm probably not the designer to choose for a sci-fi book. So maybe looking for somebody who has books in that vein, in that space, which it really depends. Sometimes designers are very flexible, and just because I haven't done a sci-fi book before doesn't mean I can't. But if you have to use something to narrow it down, I would probably suggest that.
And so it leads to my next question. Does a designer have any specific book cover genre, or can a designer work on practically anything?
I think a designer can work on anything, because even outside of the book covers realm, for me as a designer in general, I've had clients come to me asking me to do stuff, and I've worked on projects where I haven't necessarily done that type of project before. But design is design. It's type, it's images, it's color. So if you're a good designer, I think you can design anything. If it's different, you might not be comfortable with it, or it might not be of interest to you, which definitely helps. I've certainly designed books where I couldn't even tell you what they were about because it was so outside of my kind of realm of understanding. But it's always helpful when it's like something I'm into. I'm interested in travel and other countries. So your book was like, oh, I totally get it. I want to move and go live somewhere else maybe too. I want to do that. Tell me how you did that. But in general, if you have a really good designer, they should be able to design anything. I never liked that when I worked for a company or when I would look for a design job, that they would not consider me because I didn't work in that very specific realm, area. where they're like, oh, you only worked on this and this, but you've never done this. I'm like, I think I've done it long enough that I can figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. But again, since, when you're looking at portfolios, and if you have to make some sort of judgment calls at that point, and if you're only able to pick 5 designers, you might as well look for somebody who has done work in that, just as a way to kind of eliminate others. I think it's okay, but in general, no, anybody should be able to do anything.
And for all the skeptics out there, why is a book cover design important?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just spoke to an author yesterday, and he's published a whole bunch of books before, and a couple of the books he did the covers himself. And he said, this is the first time I'm hiring like a real professional designer.
Really?
So it was so interesting because he's obviously like successful with his other books, which I don't know what that says about, maybe book cover design isn't as important because he's done very well with these other covers. But hiring a professional, it's for the same reason as you would hire a professional for anything else, right? Just like right now, everybody might think they're a good photographer because we all have our iPhones and we have Instagram filters and whatever. But there are professional photographers so it's really the same reason why you should hire, if you're serious about your book, if you really want to put in the time to market it, to get it out there, you should work with a professional who will do their job. And then you can focus on what you're supposed to do, right? There's no reason for you to focus on something that's not your job. Certainly welcome your opinion and feedback, but this is what I do. It takes the pressure off of you. You focus on writing and, promoting your book. So, and I think ultimately you get a better product.
Well, you preach someone that is already convinced.
Well, how I would explain it also to people, and this is how I approach it, design with my students, because often I'll ask my students, you're taking your graphic design major, or you're taking this graphic design class, what is graphic design? And they'll start saying, oh, it's digital art, or it's doing things on the computer. But I say, well, hold on, because this all existed before the computer, right? So take that tool away and you wouldn't have so many people saying, I can do my own book cover, because the process was very different, much more like specific and difficult, and it wasn't accessible to everyone because it involved totally different types of steps. But again, design is design. It still involved typography and art and color and layout and all of that, but we did it differently. But now, because it's all computerized, obviously, it's been for a while now, but people have so much access to it, they think like, oh, I can do it because I can just press a few buttons. Or, they might have really good taste also and can maybe do something decent, but it is because it's a much more accessible field now. But if you take that tool out of the equation, can they sketch it out on paper? Can they come up with, like you did? But right, can it go any further than that? Would they know what to do with that sketch?
Believe me, no, because I tried making like a better sketch on Canva, and I just couldn't. It's like,
no, because it's not what you do.
And so, according to you, what are the top mistakes that indie authors are making when doing their own cover?
Oh, when they're doing their own cover, in addition to the creative part of it, to just like creating a good design, there's a whole technical aspect to it in terms of how to set up the file, because ultimately you have to create a file, you have to export it a certain way so that it's ready to upload to KDP or to Ingram Spark or whoever you're using, right? So there's this whole technical part to it in terms of where you have to think about resolution, things like bleed, which terms like that might not mean anything to somebody who's not in the industry. That's anything like extra that goes beyond the edges of the book. You have to just know how to set it up. The spine size, right? We're waiting on like your page count so that I can adjust, do the calculation and create the correct spine size, things like that. So there's a lot of technical aspects to it as well that I feel like if you're doing it yourself, it might take you longer. So the mistakes are, they're making mistakes that it would take me maybe 5 minutes to do, you know, not to minimize it, but it's something that I know. And now the author who's doing it themselves is maybe will wind up with a lower resolution or a poorer quality product because from the technical point of view, they didn't set up the file correctly.
So when looking for a designer, what would be the criteria an author has to pay attention to?
I think just looking at their work and finding somebody who has like the style in their work that speaks to them, not necessarily to their particular book, but in general, right? We all have different tastes and gravitate toward different styles. So I think that's really what they should pay attention to. I think on Readsy, especially, like, we get reviews. So definitely read the reviews. Just like, you know, I always say, like, when I travel and I read reviews, like on TripAdvisor, a negative review might not be negative for me because somebody who might complain about something might be an item that's not as important to me, right? So same thing in reading the reviews, and they might see something in a review that might not be the best thing, but it might not apply to their book. So reviews, whether they're positive or negative, you just need to read from the point of view of what you need. I think, you know, it's great that we have them there. And, you know, in addition to the design itself, you want somebody who is responsive because there's so much communication that we do because we don't see each other in person. Everything is done online. And, you know, schedule-wise, that's important as well. Somebody who's going to stay on schedule. So when you're reading the reviews, again, you want to make sure maybe that's mentioned. So kind of deciding what's important to you and seeing if those items kind of check the boxes in the feedback that designer received.
And how much detail do you need to know yourself as a designer before starting on the book cover?
You know, everybody always asks me, like, oh, do you have to read the book?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Question. Do you need to read the book, or do you need to?
Yeah, obviously I want to know what the book is about and I want to get a general summary, but there's no way that I have time to read the book. Some authors will send me their entire manuscript and, you know, I'm like, all right, I'll take a look. And I'll like skim it and look at the beginning, but I definitely can't. It's just impossible to read every single book that I work on. So really just a summary, but then I will read them after the fact once they're published. I love getting them and I look at them. Not every single one. Again, like, you know, the ones that interest me. So that's always fun. But, you know, just really knowing for me, knowing the summary and also the mood that the author wants to evoke from the cover. You know, it's not so much the specifics, but do they want the person picking up the book or looking at the book to see that it's happy, or is it silly? Is it sad? Is it mysterious? You know, that kind of trying to relate the mood that they want to set, the tone, that's important, you know, because that's really what I'm creating is a tone, a mood, not so much like necessarily like literal images, which we have, but how are they interpreted by the viewer?
Okay. And another question that I have is like, is there any difference in working with an indie author and a publisher? Because you worked for both, so is there any difference between the two? I
mean, I can't speak too much right now because I haven't worked for a publishing house recently, and I don't know if things are much different. Possibly not. But I think the main difference would be is that as a designer in a publishing house, I would have minimal contact with the authors. Sometimes I did, but very rarely. Everything goes through the editor. So there's that in-between person. So often I'm not the one presenting the work directly to the author. I present it to kind of the person in charge who is that go-between. So that would be the main, I think, the biggest difference. And that's why I love like working with all these indie authors, because I get to meet all these like amazing people. It's great. And I get very involved in their projects because they're all like very personal projects.
Does it touch you in a way that it also influences your work? For example, you said that you've worked on a lot of nonfiction. So I don't know, does it affect how you work or how you were inspired?
I think so, definitely. Like, to be honest, like I said, there are some books I've worked on where I really don't have like that connection to. I understand it from an intellectual point of view. I get what the author wants. I understand what the book is. I understand what it should look like. You know, I'll still do a professional job and it'll still be a cover that they're happy with. But the ones that interest me more, or that have a very touching story behind it, or where I connect really with the author, it's much more interesting inspires me a little bit more, for sure. Yeah.
One last question. What was the strangest request you've ever had during your work as a designer?
So I've had some requests where I wound up like saying no to a project, right? So it didn't even get to the point where I worked on it. I've had like a request where somebody said, somebody I know or a relative is an artist, so they're going to do my cover. I just need to hire a designer so they can explain to me how to do it. It should really only take like an hour and a half. So, yeah. So, I mean, and it's actually something I do. I do teach people how to become designers, but it doesn't take an hour and a half. Plus, this isn't the platform for it, right?
Yeah.
That my education part of my career is the platform for that. On Reedsy, you know, where authors contact me, that's not what I do here.
No.
So I declined that one. You know, in a polite way, of course, like saying, you know, it's not really something I do. I feel like it's actually going to take a little longer, so probably the budget's not going to match up. Yeah, thank you. And then in terms of a project that I did start doing, and then kind of a request came out as, you know, I've had authors who had just like very specific design ideas, who said like, this is what I want, and basically I would recreate it. And again, as a designer, it's really not something I love to do or something that I should be doing. But, you know, they had like a very specific thing, like, here's this thing, I sketched it out, but where they were like, they just needed a pair of hands almost, right? This is what I want you to recreate it. It's not really what we do, although, again, like I was able to do. So that wasn't, you know, that wasn't great. Like professionally, it's obviously not very satisfying. And it's always like very surprising because on one hand, they're looking for a designer, but on the other hand, they don't know what a designer really does.
Where can we find you online?
So you can find me on Reedsy, of course. But I do, like I said, I do all sorts of design, and I have my website, and it's asyablue.com, ASYABLUE.com, you know, or my email, it's asya@asyablue.com, ASYA@ASYABLUE.com.
Well, thank you for this interview. That was a real pleasure to talk to you and to ask all those questions.
Thank you. And, you know, I wish you all the best with this book. It was really so much fun. I can't wait to see it so I can share it also. Like once it's out, I want to share it on all my social media pages, put it on my website, because I love the design as well. You know, and I really try when I give authors options, and I always tell this to my students also, never design something you don't like, because that's the one somebody's going to pick and you're going to be stuck with that. So I liked all the options I gave you, but I love the finished product. It's so much fun. I think it's very appealing, and it really captures, I think, like the mood that you wanted to set with the book.
Yeah, exactly. That's all about that. It's all about mood, and the color are very like, it pops.
Yeah, and especially now, we need that. It's like, it's very cheerful, it's uplifting, it's fun. I think it also gives us something to maybe look forward to once we can travel some more.
I hope you like this interview with Asya Blue, who was the creative behind the cover of The Londoners that you can see here. If you have any question for her, please ask them in the comments below. I will pass them on to Asya as soon as possible. If you like this video, don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up, because it helps me with the YouTube algorithm, and to subscribe to this channel because I post new videos every Tuesday on writing and self-publishing. And if you don't want to miss it, please do subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and wash your hands, guys. Bye.